The first sound wasn't the gunshot. It was my niece screaming my name. Not loud, not dramatic, just sharp enough to slice straight through the calm of a summer afternoon and tell me something had gone horribly wrong. I was inside the house, reviewing motions I'd already read twice, when the sound hit, the brittle crack of something breaking, followed by silence so heavy it felt intentional. The kind of silence people freeze inside because they don't yet know how bad things are allowed to be. Then the scream. I was moving before my brain caught up. Papers slid off the desk. My chair tipped backward. I didn't remember standing, only the sensation of my heart slamming once. Hard. Like it was warning me. By the time I reached the front door, my mind had already rejected the first few explanations. Firecracker? No. Car backfire? Wrong rhythm. A drop tool? Too sharp. I stepped onto the porch barefoot, the wood warm beneath my feet. And that's when I saw her. My niece, Hannah, 13 years old, standing frozen near the edge of my driveway. One hand clutched her shoulder, the other hanging useless at her side. Her face was pale in a way that doesn't belong to children. Not fear, shock. And behind her, lodged in the white vinyl fence, was a clean, round hole. A bullet hole. For a half second, my brain refused to accept it. I stared at the fence like it was a typo in reality. Something that couldn't possibly belong there. Then I saw the blood. Not a lot. Just enough to matter. Just enough to turn my stomach cold. I crossed the distance to her in 3 strides. "Hannah," I said, keeping my voice steady by force alone. "Look at me." Her eyes found mine slowly, like they were wading through something thick. "She shot," she whispered. "She shot at me." I turned. Across the property line stood Margaret Ellis, president of the Willow Creek Estates Homeowners Association. Late 50s, perfect hair, pastel cardigan despite the heat, and in her shaking hands, a handgun. She wasn't pointing it anymore. It dangled uselessly at her side now, like she hadn't fully processed what her finger had just done. Her mouth was open, lips parted, eyes wide in disbelief. Not fear, not guilt, confusion, as if the universe had betrayed her by reacting. "You were trespassing," she said, finally, voice thin and brittle. "I warned you. Trespassing. On my driveway." My niece was standing exactly where I told her to wait while I grabbed her phone from inside. 10 feet from my front door, on property I'd owned for 12 years. I didn't respond. I wrapped my jacket around Hannah's shoulders, pressing gently against the wound to stop the bleeding. She flinched but didn't cry. That scared me more than if she had. "Did it hit you?" I asked. She shook her head. "It burned. Something hit me. I don't know. A ricochet, I realized. Or debris. Close enough that it didn't matter. Close enough to kill." Margaret took a step back. "I told her not to loiter," she said, louder now, as if volume could rewrite physics. "There are rules here. You people never respect them. You people." I felt something inside me go still. Not anger. Focus. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone with one hand while keeping pressure on Hannah's shoulder with the other. My thumb hovered over the screen for half a second. I didn't dial 911. Not yet. Margaret noticed. Her brow furrowed. "You should call an ambulance," she said. Her tone suddenly managerial, like she was presiding over a meeting. "This could be serious. I'll contact HOA Legal." HOA Legal. She was already protecting herself. I looked at her then, really looked. At the way her eyes flicked between Hannah and the fence. At the way her shoulders squared, rehearsing a story. At how quickly the shock drained away, replaced by calculation. She didn't think she'd done anything wrong. She thought she'd enforced a rule. "Hannah," I said quietly, "I need you to stay with me, okay?" She nodded. I turned back to Margaret. "Put the gun down," I said. She bristled. "I'm licensed." "Put down." She hesitated, then placed it on the hood of her Lexus like it was evidence she expected to retrieve later. "I'll have the board handle this," she said. "There have been ongoing issues with your property. Complaints. Non-compliance." I almost laughed. Complaints. I carried Hannah inside, sat her gently on the couch, and grabbed the first aid kit from the hall closet. My hands moved automatically, years of courtroom discipline translating into emergency calm. But inside my head, a different calculation was happening. Because this wasn't just a negligent discharge. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was an HOA president pulling a firearm on a child because she felt empowered to do so. And she felt empowered because, until now, no one had ever stopped her. I cleaned the wound carefully. It wasn't deep, but the skin was raw and angry. Hannah winced, then clenched her jaw. "You're doing great," I told her. "I'm proud of you." Her voice trembled. "Am I in trouble?" That question hit harder than the bullet. "No," I said instantly. "You did nothing wrong. Nothing." Outside, I heard Margaret's voice on the phone. Calm. Controlled. "Yes, this is Margaret Ellis, HOA president." "Yes." "An incident with a homeowner." "No, not serious, but I discharged my weapon in response to trespassing." Discharged. Like it was a printer. I closed my eyes for a moment. I could already see where this was going. She would frame it as self-defense, as enforcement, as an unfortunate but justified response to disorder. And if history was any indicator, people like her were rarely challenged. Except she had made one mistake. She assumed I was just another homeowner. She assumed I'd complain, or yell, or threaten to sue. She had no idea I'd spent 23 years on the bench. No idea I knew exactly how cases like this were buried, and exactly how to keep that from happening. I stepped back onto the porch. Margaret hung up her phone and looked at me with forced sympathy. "These things happen," she said. "Let's keep this civil." Civil. I took out my phone again. This time I dialed. "Not emergency services. Not yet." I called my clerk. "Cancel my afternoon docket," I said when she answered. "And notify the district attorney. Tell him a child was shot at in Willow Creek Estates." A pause. "Shot at?" she repeated. "Yes," I said. "By the HOA president." Margaret's face changed. Just a flicker. But it was there. "What is this?" she asked, suddenly wary. "Who are you calling?" I looked her dead in the eye. "People who don't answer to HOA boards." And for the first time since she pulled the trigger, she looked unsure. The sirens didn't arrive fast. That was the first thing that bothered me. Not because I wanted chaos, but because delays give people time to rehearse lies. Margaret stood near her Lexus, arms folded now, phone pressed against her ear again. Her posture had changed. Less shaken. More rehearsed. She paced in short, tight steps, nodding as if someone on the other end was reassuring her that everything would be fine. People like her always had someone telling them it would be fine. I stayed on the porch just inside the doorway, where Hannah could still see me. I kept my body angled so she didn't have to see Margaret or the fence. I'd already moved the first aid kit away, cleaned up the blood, made the scene look calmer than it felt. Children don't need to absorb adult cruelty in real time. Margaret ended her call and looked over at me. "You didn't need to make this dramatic," she said. "This neighborhood has procedures." Procedures. I said nothing. That unsettled her more than shouting would have. She cleared her throat. "The board has had multiple complaints about your household. Noise. Guests. Unauthorized use of shared space. I warned you last month." "You sent a letter," I replied, calm, flat. "Well," she said, lifting her chin. "Then you were aware." Aware. She kept using words that spread responsibility thin, like butter over a burnt piece of toast. I heard tires crunching on gravel. 2 patrol cars rolled in, lights flashing but sirens off now. Slow. Curious. Controlled. Margaret straightened instantly. She stepped forward before the officers even exited their vehicles. "Thank God you're here," she said, voice trembling just enough to sound shaken. "I'm Margaret Ellis, HOA president. There was a situation involving trespassing. I felt threatened. The officers exchanged a glance. One of them, a tall man with a shaved head, approached her first. Of course he did. She looked like the safest narrative in the driveway. "Ma'am," he said, "are you injured?" No, she replied quickly. But a child was on my property, refusing to leave. I warned her repeatedly. I watched carefully. She never mentioned the gun. She never mentioned firing it. She never mentioned the fence. She framed the story the way people always do when they expect authority to lean their way. The second officer, younger, female, walked toward me. Sir, she said, can you tell me what happened? I met her eyes. My 13-year-old niece was standing on my driveway, I said evenly. The HOA president fired a gun. A bullet struck the fence behind her. My niece was injured by debris. Her pen froze. Fired a gun? Yes. Behind her, Margaret's head snapped around. That's not what happened, Margaret said sharply. I discharged my weapon as a warning. She startled me. A warning. The shaved-head officer turned to Margaret. Ma'am, he said slowly, did you fire a firearm? Margaret hesitated. Just long enough. Yes, she said, but legally. I'm licensed. The officer nodded, already tired. Where's the weapon now? Margaret gestured to the hood of her car. He approached it carefully, checked the chamber, cleared it. His jaw tightened slightly. How many rounds were fired? 1, Margaret said. Accidentally. Accidentally. I watched the word land wrong. The younger officer looked back at me. Is the child inside? Yes. Can we see her? Of course. I stepped aside and led her in. Hannah was sitting upright on the couch, shoulders tense, eyes fixed on the window like she expected something else to happen at any second. This is Officer Ramirez, I said gently. She just wants to make sure you're okay. Hannah nodded. Ramirez crouched to her level. Hi, Hannah. I'm really sorry this happened. Can you tell me where you were standing? Hannah pointed. Right there, she said. Uncle told me to wait. Did she say anything to you? She told me to get off her property, Hannah said quietly. I said I was waiting. Then there was a loud bang. Ramirez swallowed. Did she point the gun at you? Hannah hesitated. I don't know, she said. I just remember the sound. That was honest. And honesty doesn't need polish. Ramirez stood and stepped aside with me. Sir, she said softly. This is serious. Yes, I replied. It is. She glanced at the hallway, lowering her voice. Are you related to the child's parents? I'm her legal guardian for the summer. She nodded. Has an ambulance been called? Not yet. She frowned. We should. It's a superficial wound, I said. But document everything. Her eyes flicked back to mine. Everything, I repeated. She understood. Outside, the mood had shifted. The shaved-head officer was now kneeling by the fence, examining the hole. He touched the vinyl, then leaned closer. That's not a ricochet, he muttered. That's direct impact. Margaret stood nearby, arms wrapped tightly around herself. It barely missed her, she said, almost annoyed. You're exaggerating. The officer stood slowly. Ma'am, he said. Do you understand how close this came to being a homicide? Margaret laughed. Actually laughed. Oh, please, she said. That's dramatic. That's when something changed. Not in the officers. In the neighbors. Curtains had parted. Doors had opened. Phones were out. Whispers moved faster than sirens ever could. This wasn't staying quiet. Ramirez stepped outside and joined her partner. I spoke to the child, she said. She confirms the shot. Margaret's face tightened. She's confused, she snapped. Kids exaggerate. Ramirez looked at her. No, she said evenly. They don't. Adults do. Margaret turned toward me. This is absurd, she said. You're blowing this out of proportion because you've always had an issue with authority. Authority. That word again. I stepped forward. No, I said. I have an issue with people who mistake power for permission. She scoffed. You think you're special? I didn't answer. The shaved-head officer cleared his throat. We're going to need statements, he said. And we're confiscating the firearm pending investigation. Margaret's eyes widened. You can't do that, she said sharply. I know my rights. So do we, he replied. Please turn around. For the first time she hesitated, not in performance but in panic. This is an HOA matter, she said weakly. We handle things internally. Internally. I almost smiled. Ramirez glanced at me. Sir? She asked quietly. Do you want to press charges? Margaret whipped around. You can't be serious. I looked at Hannah through the window. She was watching me now. Waiting. Yes, I said. Margaret laughed again. But this time it cracked. You don't get to decide that, she snapped. You're just a homeowner. Just. The shaved-head officer raised an eyebrow. Actually, he said, any victim can request charges. Margaret turned to him. And who's going to take this seriously? She demanded. You. I took a step closer. The district attorney will, I said. She froze. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't threatened. I had just named a door she couldn't close. You already called the DA? She asked. Yes. Her breathing changed. Shallower now. Why? She asked. Who do you think you are? I held her gaze. I think, I said, that you shouldn't have pulled the trigger. That wasn't the answer she wanted. She wanted credentials. She wanted labels. She wanted reassurance that this was still her world. She didn't get it. The officers exchanged another look. Ma'am, the shaved-head officer said, please place your hands behind your back. Margaret stepped backward. This is harassment, she said. I will have your badges. He didn't flinch. Hands. Behind. Your back. The cuffs clicked. The sound carried. Neighbors gasped. Phones rose higher. Margaret's face drained of color. You're making a mistake, she hissed at me as they led her toward the patrol car. This won't end well for you. I leaned in slightly. It already has, I said. She stared at me like she was seeing something she didn't recognize. Because she was. As the door shut, Ramirez approached me again. Sir, she said. The DA is on his way. I nodded. She hesitated. Out of curiosity, she added. What do you do for a living? I looked past her. At the quiet street, the broken fence, the child who would remember this moment forever. I judge people, I said. Her eyes widened just a fraction. And somewhere in the back of the patrol car, Margaret Ellis finally understood. This wasn't an HOA issue anymore. The district attorney didn't arrive alone. That should tell you everything. 2 unmarked vehicles pulled up behind the patrol cars. Quiet and deliberate. No lights. No sirens. Just presence. The kind that doesn't ask for permission because it already has it. When Daniel Hart stepped out of the driver's seat, his face was unreadable. Gray at the temples now. Same posture I'd seen 1,000 times across courtrooms. Upright, contained, alert. He didn't rush. He didn't scan the crowd. He walked straight toward me. Margaret noticed immediately. Even from the back seat of the patrol car, cuffed and pale, she leaned forward, eyes narrowing. Who is that? She demanded through the cracked window. No one answered her. Daniel stopped a few feet from me. Judge, he said quietly. Margaret's breath caught. The word hit her like a dropped plate. Judge. Not shouted. Not announced. Just spoken. Her face changed in stages, confusion, denial, calculation, and finally something uglier. Fear. Daniel turned to the officers. Give me a quick rundown, he said. They did. Not dramatically. Not emotionally. Just facts. Child. Gunfire. HOA president. Private property. Injury. Each word was a nail. Margaret's voice rose from the back seat. This is outrageous, she said. You can't possibly be taking this seriously. Daniel didn't look at her. Ma'am, he said calmly. You are currently under investigation for aggravated assault involving a minor. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. That's not, she started. He turned then, looked directly at her. It is, he said. And it will continue. The neighbors had gone quiet. Phones were still up, but no one spoke now. Even the bravest whisperers sense when a situation crosses into something permanent. Margaret's voice dropped. You know me, she said, desperation creeping in. I've served this community for years. I keep things orderly. Daniel nodded once. Yes, he said. We'll discuss your definition of order. He turned back to me. I'll need access to the property, he said. And any HOA correspondence you've received. Already pulled, I replied. Emails, notices, letters. He raised an eyebrow. Good. Margaret leaned forward again. You can't just take his side, she said. He's biased. Daniel finally smiled. Not kindly. He's not the one under arrest, he said. That was the moment she realized something fundamental. This wasn't a misunderstanding to be smoothed over. This was a record, and records don't forget. An EMT unit arrived shortly after. They checked Hannah again, cleaned the wound more thoroughly, documented everything. She was brave, too brave, the kind of brave that costs something later. As they worked, a woman I didn't recognize stepped forward from the crowd. Officer, she said hesitantly, I'd like to give a statement. Then another, and another. Complaints spilled out like water behind a cracked dam. She threatened my son last year. She fined us without notice. She said she'd make life difficult if we didn't comply. She carries that gun everywhere. Margaret's head dropped, not in shame, in rage. Daniel listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't react. But I knew the look. He was cataloging. The younger officer, Ramirez, came to me quietly. Sir, she said, media's on the way. I nodded. It was inevitable. A child, a gun, an HOA. That combination doesn't stay local. Margaret overheard. No, she said sharply. You can't do that. This is private. Daniel turned again. It stopped being private when you fired a weapon, he said. The first news van arrived 15 minutes later. Then another. Cameras, microphones, logos. Margaret shrank back in the seat. This is going to ruin me, she whispered. I didn't respond. Not because I lacked empathy, but because consequences aren't negotiations. A reporter approached Daniel. Is it true the suspect is the HOA president? Yes, he replied. And the victim? A minor. Any connection to the homeowner? Yes. She turned her microphone toward me. Sir, do you have a statement? I looked at Hannah through the open door. She was holding a cup of water now, hand steady again. I turned back. One, I said. This was preventable. That was it. No speeches. No posturing. Margaret shouted. You're enjoying this. I met her eyes. No, I said. I'm finishing it. That night, after the street finally emptied and the patrol cars drove away, silence returned. But it was different now. Heavier. Changed. Hannah slept on the couch. Exhausted. Wrapped in a blanket. I sat at the table with a stack of printed emails. Warnings. Threats. Fines. Language that danced just shy of illegal until today. At 11:42 p.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. Judge, a woman's voice said. This is Claire Bishop, defense counsel for Margaret Ellis. I didn't respond. I'd like to discuss a resolution, she continued. Quietly, there it was, the pivot. You mean before charges are filed? I said. Yes. No, I replied. A pause. She's willing to step down, Claire said. Issue an apology. Pay medical expenses. Not sufficient, I said. She's never been arrested before. She shot at a child, I replied. Silence. Then, softer. What do you want? I looked at Hannah again. I want the process, I said. All of it. I hung up. The next morning, Margaret was arraigned. Not in my courtroom. I recused myself immediately. Ethics matter, even when anger tempts you to forget them. The judge assigned was someone Margaret didn't recognize. Someone who didn't owe her favors. Charges were read. Aggravated assault. Reckless endangerment. Use of a firearm against a minor. She pleaded not guilty. Of course she did. Outside the courthouse, cameras waited. Margaret tried to speak. Her lawyer pulled her away. Too late. The story had legs now. By noon, old posts resurfaced. Facebook comments. Emails leaked. Threats disguised as community enforcement. By evening, the HOA board resigned, every last one. They released a statement claiming ignorance. No one believed them. At 9:17 p.m., Daniel called. "She wants a deal," he said. I exhaled. "Figures. She'll plead to a felony. Surrender the firearm. Lifetime ban from HOA leadership. And jail?" I asked. "A short sentence," he admitted. "But a record." I thought of Hannah, of the sound, of the fence. "Do it," I said. He paused. "You okay?" "No," I said honestly. "But I will be." After the call, I sat alone in the quiet house. This wasn't justice yet, but it was movement. And momentum matters, because next, Margaret would have to face the one thing she never controlled. A courtroom, and a jury. Courtrooms have a smell. Paper. Wood polish. Old air recycled through vents that have heard too many confessions to care anymore. Margaret Ellis walked into hers like someone entering a place she expected to control. That was her last mistake. She wore a gray suit that morning, expensive, conservative, carefully chosen to say respectable. Her hair was perfect again, her posture upright. Anyone who didn't know the story might have mistaken her for a civic volunteer unfairly dragged into chaos. That illusion lasted exactly 12 minutes. I wasn't on the bench. I sat 3 rows back, behind the prosecution table, silent, hands folded, watching the room the way I always had, only now without authority to intervene. And that was harder than I expected. Hannah sat beside me, small in the oversized witness jacket the court provided. Her feet didn't touch the floor. She swung them gently, unaware of how much power she held simply by existing. The jury filed in. 12 strangers. No HOA ties. No neighborhood loyalty. Just people pulled from grocery lines and offices, now asked to decide whether a grown woman's fear justified a bullet. The judge entered. "Be seated." The trial began. The prosecution opened cleanly. No dramatics. No raised voice. They told the story exactly as it happened, timeline first, emotion second. That order matters. A child waiting on her uncle's driveway. An HOA president with a firearm. A shot fired. An injury. This was not enforcement, the prosecutor said. This was entitlement armed with a trigger. Margaret's lawyer rose. Claire Bishop was good. Experienced. Calm. The kind of defense attorney who never wastes words. She framed Margaret as overwhelmed. Afraid. A woman who made a tragic mistake in a world that's increasingly unpredictable. "Fear," she said, "makes us human." I watched the jury. Some nodded. Fear is relatable. That's why it's dangerous. The first witnesses were officers. Then the EMT. Then neighbors. Patterns emerged. Warnings. Threats. Escalation. The prosecution didn't push. They let the facts stack themselves. Then came Hannah. The courtroom shifted when she took the stand. Children change rooms. They don't command attention, they pull it. "Do you know why you're here today?" the prosecutor asked gently. Hannah nodded. "Yes." "Can you tell us what happened that afternoon?" She did. Simply. Without exaggeration. Without anger. "I was waiting," she said. Then there was a loud noise. My shoulder burned. I thought I was in trouble. The last sentence hit the jury hard. Children aren't supposed to think like that. Claire stood for cross-examination. She approached carefully. "Hannah," she said kindly, "you understand Mrs. Ellis was scared, right?" Hannah paused. "I don't know," she said. She looked angry. A murmur moved through the room. Claire smiled gently. "But you can't be sure what she felt, can you?" Hannah thought. "No," she said. "But I know she had a gun." Claire thanked her and sat down. That was smart. Pushing a child is never worth it. Then it was Margaret's turn. I watched her stand. She looked confident again. Too confident. She took the oath without hesitation. Claire led her through the direct examination. Community service. Years of HOA leadership. Safety concerns. Margaret spoke smoothly. I felt threatened, she said. I believed my life and the community were at risk. The prosecutor stood. Mrs. Ellis, he began. How many HOA complaints had you issued that month? Margaret blinked. I don't recall. More than 20? Possibly. And how many involved the defendant's household? Several. Several, he repeated. Would you agree you were frustrated with them? Margaret stiffened. I was enforcing rules. Rules that allow firing a weapon? No. Then why did you? She hesitated. Just a beat. I panicked, she said. The prosecutor nodded. Let's talk about that panic. He pulled up a photo. The driveway, the fence, the bullet hole. Is this where the child was standing? Yes. And you fired from here? Yes. At chest height. Margaret swallowed. I didn't aim. The prosecutor stepped closer. But you pulled the trigger. Yes. Because a 13-year-old girl frightened you. Margaret's jaw tightened. She shouldn't have been there. There it was. The prosecutor stopped. Looked at her. Your Honor, he said. May the record reflect the defendant's statement. The judge nodded. The prosecutor turned back. Mrs. Ellis, he said quietly. Whose driveway was it? Margaret opened her mouth. Closed it. His. And did you know that at the time? Yes. Then why did you tell officers she was trespassing? Margaret's voice sharpened. Because she didn't belong there. The room froze. The judge leaned forward. The prosecutor didn't interrupt. He let her talk. She didn't belong there, Margaret continued louder now. These people come in, ignore rules, disrupt neighborhoods, and then cry victim when we enforce standards. Standards. The prosecutor waited, then asked the question that ended her. When you say these people, he said evenly, who do you mean? Margaret didn't hesitate. Homeowners who think rules don't apply to them, she snapped. Children, he asked. She waved her hand. Don't twist my words. I'm not, he said. I'm clarifying. She looked at the jury, then at me, and something in her snapped. I was protecting what's mine, she shouted. I did what anyone with sense would do, gasped. The judge banged the gavel. Order. But it was too late. Fear had left her voice. Control had replaced it. And control is not a defense. The prosecutor stepped back. No further questions. Claire stood slowly. Too slowly. She asked a few soft questions. Damage control. Too late. Margaret sat down, breathing hard. She wouldn't look at the jury. She wouldn't look at Hannah. She looked straight ahead, like the room owed her silence. Closing arguments were brief. The prosecution ended with one line. Rules do not outrank human life. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. Not long. When they returned, no one spoke. The foreman stood. On the charge of aggravated assault involving a minor, he said, we find the defendant guilty. Margaret exhaled sharply. On reckless endangerment, guilty. On unlawful discharge of a firearm, guilty. The judge scheduled sentencing. Margaret finally looked at me then. Not with anger, with something like betrayal. As if I had violated an unspoken agreement. That people like her don't fall. I didn't look away. Because the truth was simple. She hadn't been judged by me. She'd been judged by her own words. Sentencing days feel different. There's no performance left. No strategy. Just consequences lining up like chairs that don't care who you used to be. Margaret Ellis walked into the courtroom slower this time. The confidence was gone. The posture still practiced, but brittle like it might collapse if tested. She didn't look at the gallery. She didn't look at Hannah. She looked straight ahead, as if staring long enough at nothing might erase what had already been decided. I sat beside my niece again. Same seat, same distance, different air. The judge entered. Everyone stood. Be seated. Margaret's attorney stood first. Claire Bishop had changed tactics. No more authority. No more justification. This was the final pivot, the plea for mercy. Your Honor, she said. Mrs. Ellis has lost everything. her reputation, her career, her standing in the community. She poses no ongoing threat. A custodial sentence would serve no purpose beyond vengeance. Margaret nodded faintly, like she'd rehearsed the argument in her head all night. Then the prosecutor stood. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't pace. He spoke like someone explaining gravity. "Your Honor," he said, "this case is not about reputation. It's about choice. The defendant chose escalation. She chose to introduce lethal force into a non-threatening situation involving a child. If the fence had not been there, we would be attending a very different proceeding today." He paused. Deterrence matters. Accountability matters. And children deserve to feel safe standing in front of their own homes. The judge leaned back, folded his hands, and looked at Margaret Ellis. "Mrs. Ellis," he said, "you may address the court." This was it. The moment where some people find humility, and others reveal themselves completely. Margaret stood. Her hands trembled slightly, not with fear, but with restrained anger. "I never intended to hurt anyone," she began. "I served my community. I maintained order when others wouldn't. I followed the law. And now I'm being punished because people are afraid to accept responsibility." Responsibility. She said it like a foreign word she resented learning. "I regret what happened," she continued. "But I refuse to be portrayed as a monster for defending myself and my neighborhood." She stopped, waited. The judge studied her, then spoke. "Mrs. Ellis," he said, "you are not being sentenced for fear. You are being sentenced for firing a weapon at chest height toward a child on property you did not own." Silence. "I have reviewed the evidence, the testimony, your statements, and what concerns this court most is not the act itself, but the absence of remorse." Margaret stiffened. "You spoke often of rules," the judge continued, "but rules exist to protect people, not empower them to harm others." He glanced at Hannah, just briefly, then back to Margaret. "For aggravated assault involving a minor, this court sentences you to 36 months, with 18 to be served in state custody. The remainder suspended, contingent upon compliance. You are permanently prohibited from possessing a firearm. You are barred from holding any position of authority within any homeowners association or similar governing body. You will complete mandatory counseling and restitution." The gavel came down. "It is so ordered." Margaret's breath left her in a sound halfway between a gasp and a scoff. "No," she whispered. "That's not." The bailiff stepped closer. It was over. As they led her away, she finally turned. Her eyes met Hannah's. For the briefest moment, something human flickered there. Then it vanished, buried under disbelief. Hannah didn't flinch. She didn't look away. She just watched. And that mattered. Outside the courthouse, cameras waited again. But this time, they weren't interested in me. They were focused on Hannah. "How does it feel?" someone asked her. She looked up at me first. I nodded. "It feels," she said carefully, "like I can stand on the driveway again." That was the headline. That night, back at the house, we fixed the fence. Not because it had to be fixed, but because repair is its own kind of closure. Hannah held the flashlight while I worked. "You know," she said after a while, "I thought judges were scary." I smiled faintly. "Some are." "Are you?" she asked. I considered the question. "No," I said, "but consequences are." She nodded. That answer made sense to her. Weeks later, letters arrived. From neighbors, from parents, from people who had felt small for a long time. They all said the same thing in different ways. "Thank you for not letting this disappear." The HOA dissolved, reformed, with limits, with oversight, not perfect, but better. And Margaret Ellis? She will spend years explaining one moment, one choice, one trigger pull. And Hannah? She still stands on the driveway sometimes, barefoot, unafraid. And every time she does, the world is a little more honest than it was before. Because power doesn't belong to the loudest voice. It belongs to those willing to face the truth and not look away.